Welcome to Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Evangelical Alliance Ireland. I'm Nick Park, and today is the last of 5 teachings I've been bringing based on principles that we can draw from the history of the Crimean War, that war that took place in the 19th century in what is part of today modern day Ukraine, and which actually can help us understand much better why the invasion of Ukraine took place and the false mythology that Vladimir Putin constructed in order to justify that invasion. But we were talking yesterday about the concept of a thin red line, and how that came from William H. Russell, the first ever real war correspondent who was sending reports back to Britain from the battlefield. And there's another way in which his reports have affected history and life even today. And that is to do with the fact that the weather in Crimea was not really what was anticipated. You know, somehow the British forces had got it in their idea that this was a nice summery place because in the summer there's beaches and it's a seaside resorts in Crimea. They just thought that, they didn't have to worry too much about the weather. And in winter it got desperately cold, and the British soldiers did not have the equipment that they needed. They didn't have the warm clothing or anything else. And because this war reporter, William H. Russell, was sending these reports back to England, or for the first time, ordinary people became aware of the needs of soldiers on the battlefield and said, is there something we can do to help? And women started knitting. And one of the things they started knitting were like hats, which were more like masks that covered the head, not just the head, but went down, covered the neck and the throat, and just had a gap for the eyes of the soldiers to be able to keep them warm in the desperately cold conditions. And because these were being knitted to send to the soldiers who were participating in the Battle of Balaclava, they became known as Balaclavas. And so today, when you see a mask, even today, gangsters wear them, and terrorists and such like. And when you see somebody wearing a balaclava, that's where the balaclava came from. It was for the soldiers that were fighting in the Battle of Balaclava and were suffering with the cold. And the other thing they used to knit was like woolen jackets, because woolen jackets that the soldiers could put on even underneath their army tunics that would keep them warm. And because one of the top officers at that time in the British Army was the Earl of Cardigan, these woolen jackets were called cardigans. And today that's why we have balaclavas, and we still have cardigans. These go back to the Crimean War. But interesting as that might be, you might say, hang on, Nick, what's that got to do with Jesus? Well, I tell you what it's got to do with Jesus, and it's this. Ordinary people realized they could make a difference. Ordinary people realized they couldn't go to war. They weren't necessarily able to become soldiers. They weren't necessarily able to be there in the Crimea. They weren't necessarily able to be there on the battlefield. But they discovered that they could do something. Even if it was knitting, they could do something that would make a difference. And there's a great lesson there for the body of Christ, because we can't all be preachers. We can't all be big name evangelists that pack out stadiums. We can't all be worship leaders. We can't all found a Christian publishing house or a Christian TV station or these kinds of high profile things. But we can all do something. God has given us all gifts, and we need to take the gifts that God has given us, even if it's just being able to knit. We need to take the gifts that God has given us and use them for the purpose of winning the war against sin and the war against evil and the war against ignorance. And we need to help in whatever way we can for the gospel of Jesus Christ to be declared across the world today. In the Crimean War, it was balaclavas and cardigans. Now it can be by prayer. It can be by sending money to the mission field. It can be writing and encourage somebody. It can be sending somebody an email or a text message to encourage them during their time of need. It can be sending a postcard to a persecuted prisoner in some other part of the world. But we can all do something. And so we as the church can learn from the balaclavas and the cardigans of the Crimean War. God bless you today. Join us again tomorrow for another Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Evangelical Alliance Ireland.